Hi, welcome back, and we are going to start chapter 14 of Percy Jackson and the Battle of the Labyrinth. Things have been very exciting. The previous chapter was very long. I was starting to worry that I started another chapter without looking at it, but no. It really was a really long chapter. Things were going very much in detail, and I get it. The the tiny details mattered because things were going that way. Also, the dreams part was really long, even if someone was to sleep till just midnight. I hope Rachel is stays safe, even if she's a mortal. I hope she's the important key that stays safe. She doesn't seem like a bad girl, and the conflict between Percy and Annabeth clears up. It's really hard to watch them go back and forth like this. I don't really have much notes to say, so let's get started with chapter 14. My brother duels me to death. The metal door was half hidden behind a laundry bin full of dirty hotel towels. I didn't see anything strange about it, but Rachel showed me where to look, and I recognized faint blue symbol etched in the metal. It hasn't been used in a long time, Annabeth said. I tried to open it once, just out of curiosity. It's rusted shut. No, Annabeth stepped forward. It just needs the touch of a half blood. Sure enough, as soon as Annabeth put a hand on the mark, it glowed blue. The metal door unsealed and creaked open, revealing a dark staircase leading down. Wow, Rachel looked calm, but I couldn't tell if she was pretending or not. She changed into a ratty Museum of Modern Art t shirt and a regular marker colored jeans, her blue plastic hairbrush sticking out of her back pocket. Her red hair was tied back, but she still had flecks of gold in it, and traces of gold glitter on her face. So, after you, you're the guide, Annabeth said with mock politeness. Lead on. The stairs led down to a large brick tunnel. It was so dark I couldn't see further than a meter in front of us. But Annabeth and I had restocked on flashlights. As soon as we switched them on, Rachel yelped. A skeleton was grinning at us. It wasn't human. It was huge for one thing, at least 2.5 meters tall. It had been strung up, chained by its wrists and ankles, so it made a giant X over the tunnel. But what really sent a shiver down my back was the single black eye socket in the center of its skull. A cyclops. It's very old. It's not anybody we know. And Annabeth said. It wasn't Tyson, she meant. But that didn't make me feel much better. I still felt like it had been put here as a warning. Whatever could kill a grown cyclops, I didn't want to meet. Rachel swallowed. You have a friend who's a cyclops? Tyson, my half brother, I said. Your half brother? Hopefully, we'll find him down here. And Grover, he's a satyr, I said. Oh, her voice was small. Well then, we'd better keep moving. She stepped under the skeleton's left arm and kept walking. Annabeth and I exchanged looks. Annabeth shrugged. We followed Rachel deeper into the maze. After 15 meters, we came to a crossroads. Ahead, the brick tunnel continued. To the right, the walls were made of ancient marble slabs. To the left, the tunnel was earth and tree roots. I pointed left. That looks like the tunnel Tyson and Grover took. Annabeth frowned. Yeah, but the architecture to the right, those old stones, that's more likely to lead to an ancient part of the maze towards Daedalus' workshops. We need to go straight, Rachel said. Annabeth and I both looked at her. That's the least likely choice, Annabeth said. You don't see it. Look at the floor, Rachel asked. I saw nothing except well worn bricks and mud. There's a brightness there. Very faint, Rachel insisted. But forward is the correct way. To the left, further down the tunnel, those tree roots are moving like feelers. I don't like that. To the right, there's a trap about 7 meters down. Holes in the walls, maybe for spikes. I don't think we should risk it. I didn't see anything like that, what she was describing, but I nodded. Okay, forward. You believe her? Annabeth asked. Yeah, don't you? Annabeth looked like she wanted to argue, but she waved at Rachel to lead on. Together we kept walking down the brick corridor. It twisted and turned, but there were no more side tunnels. We seemed to be angling down, heading deeper underground. No traps? I asked anxiously. Nothing. Rachel knitted her eyebrows. Should it be this easy? I don't know, it never was before, I said. So, Rachel, where are you from exactly? Annabeth said. She said it like, what planet are you from? But Rachel didn't look offended. Brooklyn, she said. Aren't your parents going to be worried if you're out late? Rachel exhaled. Not likely. I could be gone a week and they'd never notice. Why not? This time Annabeth didn't sound as sarcastic. Having trouble with parents was something she understood. Before Rachel could answer, there was a creaking noise in front of us, like huge doors opening. What was that? Annabeth asked. I don't know. Metal hinges, Rachel said. Oh, that's very helpful. I mean, what is it? Then I heard heavy footsteps shaking the corridor coming towards us. Run? I asked. Run, Rachel agreed. We turned and fled the way we'd come, but we haven't made it 6 meters before we ran straight into some old friends. Two Dracane, snake women in Greek armor, leveled with their javelins at our chests. Standing behind them was Kelly, the Imposa cheerleader. Well, well, Kelly said. I uncapped Riptide and Annabeth pulled her knife, but before my sword was even out of the pen foam, Kelly pounced on Rachel. Her hand turned into a claw and she spun Rachel around, holding her tight, with her talons at Rachel's neck. Taking our little mortal pet for a walk. They're such fragile things, so easy to break, Kelly asked me. Behind us, the footsteps came closer. A huge form appeared out of the gloom, a 3 meter tall Lystragonian giant with red eyes and fangs. The giant licked his lips when he saw us. Can I eat them? No, your master will want these. They will provide a great deal of entertainment, Kelly smiled at me. Now march, half-bloods, or you will die here, starting with the mortal girl. It was pretty much my worst nightmare. And believe me, I've had plenty of nightmares. We were marched down the tunnel flanked by Dracane with Kelly and the giant at the back, just in case we tried to run for it. Nobody seemed to worry about us running forward. That was the direction they wanted us to go. Up ahead, I could see bronze doors. They were about 3.5 meters tall, emblazoned with a pair of crossed swords. From behind them came a muffled roar, like a crowd. Oh, yes. The woman on my left. You'll be very popular with our host. I'd never got to look at the Dracane up close before, and I wasn't thrilled to have the opportunity. She would have had a beautiful face, except her tongue was forked and her eyes were yellow with black for pupils. She wore bronze armor that stopped at her waist. Below that, where her legs should have been, were two massive snake trunks, mottled bronze and green. She moved up a combination of slithering and walking as if she were living on skis. Who's your host? I asked. She hissed, which might have been a laugh. Oh, you'll see. You'll get along famously. He's your brother, after all. My what? Immediately I thought of Tyson, but that was impossible. What was she talking about? The giant pushed past us and opened the doors. He picked up Annabeth by her shirt and said, "You stay here." "Hey!" she protested, but the guy was twice her size, and he'd already confiscated her knife and my sword. Kelly laughed. She still had her claws at Rachel's neck. "Go on, Percy. Entertain us. We'll wait here with your friends to make sure you behave." I looked at Rachel. "I'm sorry, I'll get you out of this." She nodded as much as she could with a demon at her throat. "That would be nice." The Dracane prodded me towards the doorway at javelin point, and I walked out onto the floor of an arena. I guess it wasn't the largest arena I'd ever been in, but it seemed pretty spacious considering the whole place was underground. The dirt floor was circular, just big enough that you could drive a car around the rim if you pulled it really tight. In the center of the arena, a fight was going on between a giant and a centaur. The centaur looked panicked. He was galloping around his enemy using sword and shield, while the giant swung a javelin the size of a telephone pole, and the crowd cheered. The first tier of seats was 4 meters above the arena floor. Plain stone benches wrapped all around, and every seat was full. There were giants, dracane, demigods, telkines, and stranger things, bat-winged demons, and creatures that seemed half human and half, you name it, bird, reptile, insect, mammal. But the creepiest things were the skulls. The arena was full of them. They ringed the edge of the railing, meter-high piles of them decorated with steps between the benches. They grinned from pikes at the back of the stands and hung on chains from the ceiling like horrible chandeliers. Some of them looked very old, nothing but bleached white bone. Others looked a lot fresher. I'm not going to describe them. Believe me, you don't want me to. In the middle of all this, proudly displayed on the side of the spectators' wall, was something that made no sense to me: a green banner with the trident of Poseidon in the center. What was that doing in a horrible place like this? Above the banner, sitting in seat of honor, was an old enemy. "Luke," I said. I'm not sure he could hear me over the roaring of the crowd, but he smiled coldly. He was wearing camouflage combat trousers, a white t-shirt, and a bronze breastplate, just like I'd seen in my dream. But he still wasn't wearing his sword, which I thought was strange. Next to him sat the largest giant I'd ever seen, much larger than the one on the floor fighting the centaur. The giant next to Luke must have been 5 meters tall, easy, and so wide he took up 3 seats. He wore only lion cloth like a sumo wrestler. His skin was dark red and tattooed with blue wave designs. I figured he must be Luke's new bodyguard or something. There was a cry from arena floor, and I jumped back as the centaur crashed to the ground beside me. He met my eyes pleadingly. "Hell." I reached for my sword, but it had been taken from me and hadn't reappeared in my pocket yet. The centaur struggled to get up as the giant approached, his javelin ready. The taloned hand gripped my shoulder. "If you value your friends' lives," my Dracane guard said, "you won't interfere. This isn't your fight. Wait your turn." The centaur couldn't get up. One of his legs were broken. The giant put his huge foot on the horseman's chest and raised the javelin. He looked up at Luke and crowd cheered, "Death, death." Luke didn't do anything, but the tattooed sumo dude sitting next to him rose. He smiled down at the centaur, who was whimpering, "Please, no." Then Sumo Dude held out his hand and gave the thumbs down sign. I closed my eyes as the gladiator giant thrust his javelin. When I looked again, the centaur was gone, disintegrated to ashes. All that was left was a single hoof, which the giant took up as a trophy and showed to the crowd. They roared their approval. A gate opened at the opposite end of the stadium, and the giant marched out in triumph. In the stands, the sumo dude raised his hands for silence. Good entertainment, but nothing I haven't seen before. What else do you have, Luke, son of Hermes? Luke's jaw tightened. I could tell he didn't like being called son of Hermes. He hated his father, but he rose calmly to his feet. His eyes glittered. In fact, he seemed to be in a pretty good mood. Lord Antaeus, Luke said, loud enough for the crowd to hear, you have been an excellent host. We would be happy to amuse you to repay the favor of passing through your territory. A favor I have not yet granted. I want entertainment, Antaeus growled. Luke bowed. I believe I have something better than centaurs to fight in your arena now. I have a brother of yours, Percy Jackson, son of Poseidon. He pointed at me. The crowd began jeering at me and throwing stones, most of which I dodged, but one caught me in the cheek and made a good sized cut. Antaeus' eyes lit up. A son of Poseidon? Then he should fight well, or die well. If his death pleases you, will you let our armies cross your territory? Perhaps, Antaeus said. Luke didn't look too pleased about the perhaps. He glared down at me as if warning me that I'd better die in a very spectacular way or I'd be in big trouble. Luke, stop this. Let us go, Annabeth yelled. Luke seemed to notice her for the first time. He looked stunned for a moment. Annabeth? Enough time for the females to fight afterwards. Antaeus interrupted. First, Percy Jackson, what weapons will you choose? The Dracane pushed me into the middle of the arena. I stared up at the Antaeus. How can you be a son of Poseidon? Not the time to ask questions, Percy. Antaeus laughed at the rest, and the rest of the crowd laughed too. I am his favorite son. Behold, my temple to the Earth Shaker, built from skull of all those I've killed in his name. Your skull shall join them. Antaeus boomed. I stared in horror at all the skulls, hundreds of them, and the banner of Poseidon. How could this be a temple for my dad? My dad was a nice guy. He'd never ask me for a Father's Day card, much less somebody's skull. Percy, his mother is Gaia. Annabeth yelled at me. Her Lestrygonian captor clammed his hand over her mouth. His mother is Gaia, the earth goddess. Annabeth was trying to tell me that this was important, but I didn't know why. Maybe just because the guy had two godly parents, that would make him even harder to kill. You're crazy, Antaeus. If you think this is a good tribute, you know nothing about Poseidon, I said. The crowd screamed insults at me, but Antaeus raised his hand for silence. Weapons, and then we will see how you die. Will you have axes, shields, nets, flamethrowers? He insisted. Just my sword, I said. Laughter erupted from monsters, but immediately Riptide appeared in my hands, and some of the voices in the crowd turned nervous. The bronze blade glowed with a faint light. Round 1. The gates opened, and a Dracane slithered out. She had a trident in one hand and a weighted net in the other. Classic gladiator style. I trained against those weapons at camp for years. She jabbed at me experimentally. I stepped away. She threw her net, hoping to tangle my sword hand, but I sidestepped easily, sliced her spear in half, and stabbed Riptide through a chink in her armor. With a painful wail, she vaporized into nothing, and the cheering of the crowd died. No! Too fast, Antaeus bellowed. You must wait for the kill. Only I give that order. I glanced over at Annabeth and Rachel. I had to find a way to get them free, maybe distract their guards. Nice job, Percy, Luke smiled. You've got better with the sword, I'll grant you that. Round two, Antius yelled, and slower this time. More entertainment. Wait for my call before killing anybody, or else. The gates opened again, and this time a young warrior came out. He was a little older than me, about 16. He had glossy black hair, and his left eye was covered with an eye patch. He was thin and weary, so his Greek armor hung on us loosely. He stabbed his sword into ground, adjusted his shield straps, and pulled on his horsehair helmet. Who are you? I asked. Ethan Nakamura. I have to kill you, he said. Why are you doing this? Hey! A monster jeered from the stands. Stop talking and fight already. The others took up the call. I have to prove myself, Ethan told me. Only way to join up. And with that he charged. Our swords met in mid-air and the crowd roared. It didn't seem right. I didn't want to fight to entertain a bunch of monsters, but Ethan Nakamura wasn't giving me much choice. He pressed forward. He was good. He'd never been at Camp Half-Blood as far as I know, but he'd been trained. He parried my strike and almost slammed me with his shield, but I jumped back. He slashed. I rolled to one side. We exchanged thrusts and parries, getting a feel for each other's fighting style. I tried to keep Ethan's blind side, but it didn't help much. He'd apparently been fighting with only one eye for a long time, because he was excellent at guarding his left. Blood! The monsters cried. The opponent glanced up at the stands. That was his weakness, I realized. He needed to impress them. I didn't. He yelled an angry battle cry and charged me, but I parried his blade and backed away, letting him come after me. Boo! Antius said. Stand and fight. Ethan pressed me, but I had no trouble defending, even without a shield. He was dressed for defense, heavy armor and shield, which made it very tiring to play offense. I was a softer target, but I was also lighter and faster. The crowd went nuts, yelling complaints and throwing rocks. We'd been fighting for almost 5 minutes and there was no blood. Finally, Ethan made his mistake. He tried to jab at my stomach and I locked his sword hilt in mine and twisted. His sword dropped into dirt. Before he could recover, I slammed the butt of my sword in his helmet and pushed him down. His heavy armor helped me more than him. He fell on his back, dazed and tired. I put the tip of my sword to his chest. Get it over with, Ethan groaned. I looked up at Antius. His red face was stony with displeasure, but he held up his hand and put his thumbs down. Forget it, I sheathed my sword. Don't be a fool, they'll just kill us both. I offered him my hand. Reluctantly, he took it. I helped him up. No one dishonors the games, Antius bellowed. Your heads shall both be tributes to Poseidon. I looked at Ethan. When you see your chance, run. Then I turned to Antius. Why don't you fight me yourself? If you've got Dad's favor, come down here and prove it. The monsters grumbled in the stands. Antius looked around and apparently realized he had no choice. He couldn't say no without looking like a coward. I'm the greatest wrestler in the world, boy, he warned. I've been wrestling since the first pancration. Pancration? I asked. He means fighting to the death. No rules, no holds barred. It used to be an Olympic sport, Ethan said. Thanks for the tip, I said. Don't mention it. Rachel was watching me with wide eyes. Annabeth shook her head empathetically. The Listrygonian's hand still clamped over her mouth. I pointed my sword at Antius. Winner takes all. I win, we all go free. You win, we die. Swear upon the river Styx. Antius laughed. This shouldn't take long. I swear to your terms. He leaped off the railing into the arena. Good luck. You'll need it, Ethan told me. Then he backed up quickly. Antius cracked his knuckles. He grinned, and I saw that even his teeth were etched in wave patterns, which must have made brushing after meals a real pain. Looking at the bright side, Percy. Looking at the bright side, aren't you? Weapons? He asked. I'll stick with my sword. You? He held up his huge hands and wiggled his fingers. I don't need anything else. Master Luke, you will referee this one. Luke smiled down at me. With pleasure. Antaeus lunged. I rolled under his legs and stabbed him in the back of his thigh. Ah, he yelled, but where the blood should have come out, there was a spout of sand, like I'd burst the side of an hourglass. It spilled on the ground and the earth rose up to collect around his leg, almost like a cast. When it fell away, the wound was gone. He charged again. Fortunately, I'd had some experience fighting giants. I dodged sideways this time and stabbed him under the arm. Riptide's blade was buried into the hilt in his ribs. That was the good news. The bad news was that it wrenched out of my hand when the giant turned, and I was thrown across the arena, weaponless. Antius bellowed in pain. I waited for him to disintegrate. No monster had ever withstood a direct hit like that from my sword. The celestial bronze blade had to be destroying his essence, but Antius groped for the hilt, pulled out the sword, and tossed it behind him. More sand poured from the wound, but again the earth rose up to cover him. Dirt coated his body like the way to his shoulder. As soon as the earth spilled away, Antius was fine. Now you see why I never lose, demigod? Antius gloated. Come here and let me crush you. I'll make it quick. Antius stood between me and my sword. Des- between me and my sword. Desperately, I glanced to the other side and caught Annabeth's eye. The earth, I thought. What had Annabeth been trying to tell me? Antius's mother was Gaia, the Earth Mother, the most ancient goddess of all. Antius's father might have been Poseidon, but Gaia was keeping him alive. I couldn't hurt him as long as he was touching the ground. I tried to skirt around him, but Antius anticipated my move. He blocked my path, chuckling. He was just toying with me now. He had me cornered. I looked up at the chains hanging from the ceiling, dangling the skulls of his enemies on hooks. Suddenly, I had an idea. I fainted to the side, to the other side. Antius blocked me. The crowd jeered and screamed at Antius to finish me off, but he was having too much fun. Puny boy, not a worthy son of the sea god, he said. I felt my pen return to my pocket, but Antius wouldn't know about that. He would think Riptide was still in the dirt behind him. He would think my goal was to get my sword. It wasn't much of an advantage, but it was all I had. I charged straight ahead, crouching low as he would think I was going to roll between his legs again. While he was stooping, ready to catch me like a grounder, I jumped for all I was worth, kicking off his forearm, scrambling up his shoulder like it was a ladder, placing my shoe on his head. He did the natural thing. He straightened up and indignantly and yelled, "Hey!" I pushed off, using his force to catapult me towards the ceiling. I caught the top of the chain and the skulls and hooks dangled beneath me. I wrapped my legs around the chain just like I used to do at the ropes across in gym class. I drew Riptide and sawed off the chain next to me. Come down here, coward, Antius bellowed. He tried to grab me, but I was just out of reach. Hanging on for my dear life, I yelled, Come up and get me, or are you too slow and fat? He howled and made another grab for me. He caught a chain and tried to pull himself up. While he was struggling, I lowered my sawn off chain hook first. It took me 2 tries, but I finally snagged Antiochus's lion cloth. What? He yelled. Quickly, I slipped the free chain through the fastening link on my own chain, pulled it taut, and secured it the best I could. Antiochus tried to slip back to the ground, but his butt stayed suspended by his lion cloth. He had to hold on to the other chains with both hands to avoid getting flipped upside down. I prayed the lion cloth and the chain would hold up for a few more seconds. While Antiochus cursed and flailed, I scrambled around the chain, swinging and cutting like I was some kind of crazed monkey. I made loops with hooks and metal links. I didn't know how I did it. My mom always said I have gift of forgetting stuff tangled up. Plus, I was desperate to save my friends. Anyway, within a couple of minutes, the giant was suspended above the ground, hopelessly snarled in chains and hooks. I dropped to the floor, panting and sweaty. My hands were raw from climbing. Get me down, Antiochus demanded. Free him. He's our host, Luke ordered. I uncapped Riptide. I'll free him. And I stabbed the giant in the stomach. He bellowed and the sand poured out. But he was far too up to touch the earth, and the dirt did not rise to help him. Antiochus just dissolved, pouring out bit by bit, until there was nothing left but empty swinging chains, a really big lion cloth on hook, and a bunch of grinning skulls dancing above me like they finally had something to smile about. Jackson, I should have you killed long ago, Luke yelled. You tried, I reminded him. Let us go, Luke. We had a sworn agreement with Antiochus. I am the winner. He did just I expected. He said, Antiochus is dead. His oath dies with him. But since I am feeling merciful today, I'll have you killed quickly. He pointed at Annabeth. Spare the girl. His voice quavered just a little. I would speak to her before our great triumph. Every monster in the audience drew a weapon or extended its claws. We were trapped, hopelessly outnumbered. Then I felt something in my pocket, a freezing sensation, growing colder and colder. The dog whistle. My fingers crossed around it. For days I had avoided using Quintus's gift. It had to be a trap, but now I had no choice. I took it out of my pocket and blew. It made no audible sound as it shattered into shards of ice, melting in my hand. Luke laughed. What was that supposed to do? From behind me came a surprised yelp. The Lastrigonian giant who'd been guarding Annabeth flew past me and smashed into the wall. Orf! Kelly the Imposa screamed as 200-kilogram black mastiff picked her up like a chew toy and tossed her through the air straight into Luke's lap. Mrs. O'Leary snarled and the two Dracane guards backed away. For a moment, the monsters in the audience were caught completely by surprise. Let's go, I yelled at my friends. Heel, Mrs. O'Leary. The far exit, Rachel cried. That's the right way. Ethan Nakamura took his cue. Together we raced across the arena and out the far exit. Mrs. O'Leary right behind us. As we ran, we could hear the disorganized sounds of an entire army trying to jump out of the stands and follow us. Very exciting chapter. And also finding another brother of Percy who is also just as stupid. Anyway, I don't see much discussion in the chapter to be done, at least not yet. Just the fact that Rachel is way too calm about these things that are happening. But I don't know, maybe she has anxiety and maybe she's calm in anxious situations. We are never sure. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I will see you guys next time. Bye.